In the gleaming marble halls of Avalon Castle, where portraits of ancient kings watch over every whispered conversation, a secret has been buried for 25 years that could destroy the most beloved royal family in Europe. Princess Isabella of Ravencroft thought she knew everything about her privileged life until a mysterious letter arrives on her 25th birthday, written in her deceased mother's handwriting and hidden away since the day Isabella was born. The letter contains just 5 words that turn her world upside down. "You are not our daughter." As Isabella begins to unravel the truth behind her identity, she discovers a web of lies that reaches into the highest levels of the Ravencroft monarchy, involving switched identities, political conspiracies, and a love affair that nearly toppled the throne. With the kingdom preparing for her engagement to a foreign prince and her father's health failing, Isabella must navigate treacherous palace politics while uncovering a truth so explosive that revealing it could either save the monarchy or destroy it forever. In a world where bloodlines determine destiny and secrets are more valuable than jewels, one young woman's quest for the truth will test the very foundations of royal power. The golden afternoon light streaming through the stained glass windows of Avalon Castle painted rainbow patterns across the ancient stone floors as Princess Isabella Charlotte Ravencroft prepared for what should have been one of the happiest days of her life. Tomorrow marked her 25th birthday, and with it would come her formal engagement to Prince Marcus of Nordheim, a union that would strengthen the political ties between 2 powerful European kingdoms and secure her position as the future Queen of Ravencroft. Isabella stood before the towering mirror in her private chambers, adjusting the sapphire necklace that had belonged to royal women for 3 centuries. Her reflection showed a young woman of undeniable beauty, with the characteristic auburn hair and green eyes that had marked the Ravencroft bloodline for generations. Yet something in her expression suggested a restlessness that no amount of royal training had been able to suppress. The kingdom of Ravencroft, nestled between snow-capped mountains and pristine coastlines, had prospered under the wise rule of King Charles and Queen Margaret for nearly 3 decades. Their love story had been the stuff of fairy tales, a genuine romance between 2 young royals that had captured the imagination of people around the world. Isabella had grown up believing she was the living symbol of that perfect union, the beautiful princess who would carry on the family legacy. But perfection, Isabella had learned, was often an illusion carefully maintained by an army of courtiers, advisors, and protocol officers who understood that the monarchy's survival depended on public perception as much as actual governance. Behind the carefully staged photo opportunities and scripted public appearances lay a reality far more complex and sometimes darker than the fairy tale presented to the world. The first crack in Isabella's perfect world had appeared 6 months earlier during her mother's final illness. Queen Margaret, ravaged by cancer but determined to maintain her royal duties until the end, had grown increasingly agitated during her last weeks. She spoke often of secrets that needed to be revealed and debts that remained unpaid, though the doctors attributed these concerns to the effects of pain medication and the natural anxiety that accompanied terminal illness. On the night before Queen Margaret's death, Isabella had been sitting vigil beside her mother's bed when the Queen suddenly gripped her hand with surprising strength. "The music box," she whispered urgently, her eyes more lucid than they had been in weeks. "Find the music box with the dancing ballerina. Everything you need to know is there, my darling. I'm so sorry we waited so long." Isabella had attributed her mother's words to delirium, but she couldn't forget the intensity in Queen Margaret's voice, or the tears that had streamed down the dying woman's face. After the funeral, and the months of mourning that followed, Isabella had searched through her mother's personal belongings, but had found no music box matching the description. She had eventually concluded that it was simply another product of her mother's confused final days. The music box had arrived that morning with no return address, delivered by a palace courier who claimed it had been found in a storage room that was being cleared for renovation. Isabella recognized it immediately from her mother's description, an exquisite piece crafted from rosewood and mother of pearl, with a tiny ballerina who pirouetted to a melody that Isabella somehow knew despite having never heard it before. Hidden beneath the velvet lining of the music box's compartment, Isabella had discovered a sealed envelope, bearing her name in her mother's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a letter dated 25 years earlier, just days after Isabella's birth, along with a small silver key and a set of coordinates that meant nothing to Isabella at the time. The letter's contents had shattered every assumption Isabella had made about her life and identity. Written in Queen Margaret's careful script, it revealed a story of deception that began before Isabella's birth and had shaped every aspect of her existence. According to the letter, Queen Margaret and King Charles had struggled with infertility for the first 8 years of their marriage, a private anguish hidden from the public by carefully orchestrated medical bulletins and royal appearances. The pressure to produce an heir had been enormous, not just from the traditional expectations of monarchy, but from political necessities that required a clear line of succession to maintain stability in the region. The solution had come from an unexpected source. Lady Catherine Ashworth, a distant cousin of the royal family and one of Queen Margaret's closest childhood friends, had found herself pregnant and unmarried at the age of 19. The father was a young man from a middle-class family who had no knowledge of the pregnancy and no means to support a child, even if he had known. In the conservative social climate of the time, Catherine faced social ruin and financial destitution. Queen Margaret's letter described a secret arrangement that had been made between the two women, blessed by King Charles, and facilitated by a small group of absolutely trusted advisors. Catherine would live in seclusion during her pregnancy, officially traveling abroad for an extended cultural education. When the child was born, she would be adopted by the royal family and raised as their natural daughter, while Catherine would receive a generous settlement and the promise of a respectable marriage arrangement. The deception had required careful planning and absolute secrecy. False medical records were created documenting Queen Margaret's pregnancy, complete with regular checkups and progress reports that were shared with the press and public. Catherine gave birth in a private clinic run by the royal family's personal physician, and within hours, the infant Isabella was being presented to the world as the natural daughter of King Charles and Queen Margaret. Isabella's hands trembled as she read her mother's words, describing the moment she first held her adopted daughter. "You were so perfect, my darling, and I loved you instantly with a fierce devotion that surprised even me. In my heart, you became my daughter in every way that mattered, and I have never for a moment regretted our decision. But I have carried the weight of this secret for 25 years, and I cannot bear the thought of taking it to my grave." The letter went on to explain that Lady Catherine had married a respectable gentleman 2 years after Isabella's birth and had moved to a different country, where she had raised a family of her own. She had never attempted to contact Isabella or claim any rights as her biological mother, honoring the agreement that had given Isabella the life of a princess, while allowing Catherine to escape the scandal that would have destroyed her. But the most shocking revelation came in the letter's final paragraphs. Queen Margaret wrote of a growing political crisis that had emerged in recent years, involving questions about the legitimacy of royal bloodlines and challenges to the monarchy's traditional authority. Certain political factions had begun investigating the backgrounds of royal family members, looking for any irregularities that could be used to undermine the institution of monarchy itself. "If our secret is discovered by the wrong people," Queen Margaret had written, "it could be used not just to destroy your claim to the throne, but to justify the abolishment of the monarchy entirely." There are those who would use this revelation as evidence that the royal family has been deceiving the people for a generation, that we are no more legitimate than any other family seeking power through fraud and manipulation. The letter concluded with an address and instructions for using the silver key, along with a plea for Isabella to seek out the truth about her origins while being extremely careful about whom she trusted with the information. "You have been a wonderful daughter, and you have every right to rule this kingdom regardless of the circumstances of your birth," Queen Margaret had written. "But knowledge is power, and this knowledge could either protect you or destroy you, depending on how it is used." Isabella set the letter down and walked to her window, gazing out at the kingdom she had been raised to rule. The people of Ravenscroft trusted their royal family, believing in the ancient bloodlines and traditions that connected them to centuries of history. How could she tell them that their beloved princess was not who they thought she was? How could she marry Prince Marcus and become queen while carrying such a monumental secret? More troubling still were the political implications. Isabella was well aware of the growing Republican movements across Europe, groups that argued for the abolishment of monarchies in favor of democratic governments. If news of her true parentage became public, it could provide ammunition for those who claimed that royal families were nothing more than elaborate frauds perpetrated on gullible populations.
Yet Isabella also felt a deep curiosity about her biological mother and the circumstances that had led to her adoption.
Lady Catherine Ashworth had given up her child to provide her with a better life. But what had become of her in the decades since? Did she ever think about the daughter she had given to the royal family? Did she know that Isabella was about to be engaged and eventually crowned as queen? The address in Queen Margaret's letter was located in the countryside about 2 hours from the capital, in a region known for its vineyards and historic estates. The silver key presumably opened something at that location, though Isabella could only guess what secrets might be waiting for her there. As evening approached and the castle prepared for the next day's birthday celebration, Isabella made a decision that would change the course of her life. She would travel to the address in her mother's letter, using the disguise and escape routes she had learned during her security training to avoid detection by the palace guards and media who monitored her every movement. She needed to understand the truth about her origins before she could decide how to handle the explosive secret that had been placed in her hands. The kingdom's future, her own destiny, and the lives of everyone she loved might depend on the choices she made in the coming days. Isabella carefully returned the letter and key to their hiding place in the music box, her mind already planning the journey that would either confirm her worst fears or provide her with the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Tomorrow was supposed to mark the beginning of her official adult life as a royal, but instead, it would be the start of a quest to discover who she really was, and whether the truth would set her free or destroy everything she held dear. The castle bells chimed the hour, their ancient bronze voices echoing across the kingdom as they had for centuries. But for Princess Isabella, the sound no longer represented continuity and tradition. Instead, it marked the beginning of a countdown to a revelation that could change the course of history. The pre-dawn mist clung to the rolling hills of the Ravencroft countryside as Princess Isabella guided her borrowed motorcycle along the winding country roads that led away from the capital. She had chosen the motorcycle deliberately, knowing that the palace security team would be looking for her usual convoy of official vehicles, not a lone rider dressed in leather and wearing a helmet that completely concealed her identity. Escaping the palace had required every skill Isabella had learned during her mandatory security training, along with the help of her childhood friend and lady-in-waiting, Sophie Martinez. Sophie was one of the few people Isabella trusted completely, having grown up alongside the princess and sworn absolute loyalty to her, rather than to the institution of the monarchy. It was Sophie who had created the diversion that allowed Isabella to slip out through the service entrance, and Sophie who would cover for her absence until she could return. The address from Queen Margaret's letter led Isabella to a picturesque village, nestled in a valley between two gentle mountains. The main street was lined with stone cottages whose flower boxes and painted shutters spoke of a community that took pride in its appearance and traditions. Isabella parked her motorcycle behind the village church and walked the final quarter-mile to her destination, using the time to observe her surroundings and ensure that she hadn't been followed. The house at the address was larger than the village cottages but still modest by royal standards. A two-story stone structure with ivy-covered walls and a garden that showed evidence of careful tending. A discreet brass plaque by the front door identified it as Ashworth House, confirming that Isabella had found the right location. Her heart raced as she approached the door, uncertain whether anyone would be home and unsure what she would say if someone answered. The woman who opened the door was in her mid-40s, with graying brown hair pulled back in a simple style and kind eyes that bore a striking resemblance to Isabella's own. She wore a gardening apron over practical clothes, and her hands showed the calluses of someone who worked with soil and plants rather than servants and luxury. For a moment, both women simply stared at each other in recognition that went deeper than conscious thought. "You must be Isabella," the woman said softly, her voice carrying a slight tremor of emotion. "I'm Catherine Ashworth. I've been waiting for this day for 25 years. Catherine invited Isabella into a sitting room filled with books, comfortable furniture, and photographs that told the story of a life lived quietly but fully. On the mantelpiece, Isabella noticed several pictures of children at various ages, evidence of the family Catherine had built after giving up her first daughter. The sight brought a complex mixture of emotions: relief that Catherine had found happiness, but also a strange pang of jealousy toward the siblings she had never known. "Your mother, Queen Margaret, wrote to me last year when she learned of her illness," Catherine explained as she prepared tea with hands that shook slightly from nervousness. "She wanted to ensure that if you ever came looking for answers, you would find them. We agreed that it was time for you to know the truth, especially with your engagement approaching and the increasing political pressures on the monarchy." Catherine's story filled in the gaps that Queen Margaret's letter had left unexplored. She described the terror and desperation she had felt as an unmarried 19-year-old facing pregnancy in a society that offered few options for women in her position. The father had been a young artist named David Clearwater, someone Catherine had met during her brief rebellion against the expectations of her noble family. Their relationship had been passionate but brief, ending when David left to pursue his artistic ambitions in Paris without knowing that Catherine was pregnant. "I loved him deeply, but I was young and foolish about the realities of the world," Catherine said, her eyes growing distant with memory. "When I realized I was pregnant, I was terrified to tell anyone, especially my family. The scandal would have destroyed not just my reputation but theirs as well. When Margaret approached me with her proposal, it seemed like a miracle, a way to give my child the best possible life, while allowing me to escape ruin. The arrangement had been more complex than Isabella had imagined from reading Queen Margaret's letter. Catherine had spent the months of her pregnancy living in this very house, which had been purchased by the royal family and staffed with discreet caregivers who ensured her health and privacy. Royal physicians had monitored her progress while simultaneously creating the false medical records that supported the fiction of Queen Margaret's pregnancy. "The hardest part was giving you up," Catherine said, tears beginning to flow down her cheeks. "Even though I knew it was the right decision, even though I could see the love in Margaret and Charles's eyes when they held you, it merely broke my heart. But I also felt an enormous sense of relief and gratitude, knowing that you would have opportunities and protection that I never could have provided." Catherine had honored the agreement completely, never attempting to contact Isabella or interfere in her royal upbringing. She had followed Isabella's life through media coverage and official portraits, taking pride in the intelligent, compassionate young woman her daughter had become, while respecting the boundaries that had been established for everyone's protection. "But Margaret and I stayed in contact over the years," Catherine continued. "She sent me letters and photographs, sharing milestones and achievements that she thought I would want to know about. She was a wonderful mother to you, Isabella, and she never forgot that I had made your life possible. In return, I tried to provide her with the peace of mind that comes from knowing your birth mother was happy and well." Isabella learned that Catherine had married Thomas Ashworth, a kind gentleman who worked as a professor of literature at a nearby university. Thomas had known about Isabella from the beginning of their relationship and had supported Catherine's decision to give up her first child for adoption. Together, they had raised 3 children: Michael, who was now 22 and working as an engineer, Sarah, who was 20 and studying medicine, and James, who was 17 and preparing for university. "They don't know about you," Catherine admitted. "Thomas and I always planned to tell them when they were old enough to understand, but the circumstances were so unique, so tied to royal secrets and political implications, that we kept postponing the conversation. How do you explain to your children that they have a sister who happens to be a princess?" The revelation that she had 3 half-siblings living normal lives just a few hours from the palace filled Isabella with a longing she hadn't expected. Throughout her childhood, she had often wished for brothers and sisters, for companions who would understand the unique pressures of royal life. Now she discovered that she did have siblings, but they lived in a completely different world from the one she inhabited. Catherine showed Isabella to a small study where she used the silver key from Queen Margaret's music box to open a cedar chest that contained mementos from Isabella's early days. Inside were photographs of Catherine during her pregnancy, ultrasound images, the hospital bracelet from Isabella's birth, and even a few items of baby clothing that Catherine had been unable to part with. Most significant was a folder containing documentation that proved Isabella's true parentage. Catherine had kept copies of all the medical records from her pregnancy and delivery, along with letters from Queen Margaret detailing the arrangements that had been made. There was even a DNA sample, carefully preserved, that could be used for testing if Isabella ever needed definitive proof of her origins. "I also have something else," Catherine said, producing a sealed envelope from the bottom of the chest. "Before your father David left for Paris, he gave me this letter to keep. He never knew about the pregnancy, but he wanted me to have something to remember our time together. I thought you might want to know about him." The letter revealed that David Clearwater had become a successful artist living in France, where he had married and had a family of his own. He had never returned to England and had no knowledge that he had a daughter who was now a princess. Catherine had respected his privacy just as she had respected Isabella's, never attempting to contact him or inform him about the child he had unknowingly fathered. "The decision about whether to contact him is yours," Catherine said gently. "I can provide you with information about how to reach him if you choose, but I wanted you to have all the facts before making that choice." Isabella spent the afternoon learning about her biological family's history, traditions, and values. The Ashworth family had served as minor nobility for several generations, managing estates and serving in various governmental roles without seeking the spotlight or power that came with higher titles. They were known for their integrity, their service to their communities, and their commitment to education and the arts. Catherine's own background included service as a volunteer with various charitable organizations, work that she had continued after her marriage. She had used the settlement from the royal family to establish scholarship programs for young women from disadvantaged backgrounds, creating opportunities for education and advancement that she had merely been denied herself. "I've tried to honor the gift you and your parents gave me by helping other young women who face difficult circumstances," Catherine explained. "In some ways, I've been able to mother many daughters over the years, even though I couldn't raise my first one." As evening approached, Isabella realized that she faced a decision that would affect not just her own future, but the lives of everyone she had met that day. The political crisis that Queen Margaret had warned about was real and growing more serious each week. Republican movements across Europe were gaining support, and any scandal involving the royal family could provide the catalyst for a complete overthrow of the monarchical system. Yet Isabella also understood that the truth about her origins was not simply a political liability to be managed. It was part of her identity, her heritage, and her understanding of who she was and where she came from. The knowledge that she had a biological family who loved her and had made enormous sacrifices for her well-being was both comforting and empowering. Catherine seemed to understand Isabella's dilemma without needing it explained. "Whatever you decide to do with this information, I want you to know that I'm proud of the woman you've become," she said as they prepared to part. "You were raised by wonderful people who loved you deeply, and you've used your position to help others and serve your kingdom well. Your parentage doesn't change any of that." As Isabella prepared to return to the palace, Catherine gave her contact information for her 3 children and permission to reach out to them if she chose. "They would be thrilled to know they have such an accomplished sister," Catherine said with a smile. "And if the time ever comes when your royal duties become too heavy to bear, know that you have a family here who will love and support you no matter what." The ride back to the capital took place under a star-filled sky that seemed to echo Isabella's contemplative mood. She had found answers to questions she had carried for months, but those answers had led to even more complex dilemmas about duty, truth, and the nature of family and identity. Tomorrow would bring her 25th birthday celebration and her engagement to Prince Marcus, events that would set in motion the final preparations for her eventual coronation as Queen of Ravencroft. But now Isabella carried the knowledge that her claim to the throne was built on a loving deception that could either be her greatest strength or her ultimate downfall. As the lights of the palace came into view, Isabella understood that her real challenges were just beginning. The truth she had discovered would force her to make choices about loyalty, duty, and love that would define not just her own future, but the future of the entire kingdom. The grand ballroom of Avalon Castle sparkled with the light of 1,000 candles as the kingdom's most distinguished guests gathered to celebrate Princess Isabella's 25th birthday and witness her engagement to Prince Marcus of Nordheim. The cream of European nobility mingled with diplomats, business leaders, and cultural luminaries in a display of wealth and tradition that had been carefully orchestrated to project an image of stability and continuity for the monarchy. Isabella stood at the center of it all, resplendent in a gown of midnight blue silk, adorned with the Ravencroft family diamonds, playing her role as the perfect princess with practiced grace. But beneath her composed exterior, her mind raced with the implications of what she had learned during her secret journey to Catherine Ashworth's home 3 days earlier. The past 72 hours had been a whirlwind of preparation, protocol meetings, and carefully staged media opportunities, all designed to build anticipation for this evening's grand announcement. Isabella had performed her duties flawlessly, giving interviews about her excitement for married life and her commitment to serving the kingdom as its future queen. Yet every smile felt forced. Every gracious comment seemed like another layer of deception added to the foundation of lies that supported her royal identity. Prince Marcus of Nordheim was everything a royal fiancé should be: handsome, intelligent, politically astute, and genuinely committed to the welfare of his people. Their courtship had been conducted according to the ancient protocols of arranged marriages between royal houses, but it had blossomed into what Isabella had believed was genuine affection and mutual respect. Marcus knew nothing about the crisis of identity that Isabella was facing, and she wondered how he would react if he learned that his future bride was not the biological daughter of the monarchs who had promised her in marriage. The evening's formal program would culminate with King Charles announcing Isabella's engagement and presenting her with the Crown Princess tiara, a ceremony that would formally establish her as the heir apparent and begin the final phase of preparation for her eventual coronation. It was a moment Isabella had anticipated her entire life, but now it felt like a trap that would lock her into a role built on deception. The first sign that the carefully planned evening might not proceed as expected came when Isabella noticed several unfamiliar faces among the guests, men and women who seemed to be observing the proceedings with unusual intensity rather than participating in the celebration. Her security training had taught her to be aware of potential threats, and something about these individuals set off alarm bells in her mind. Her suspicions were confirmed when Sophie Martinez approached her during a brief lull in the receiving line, speaking in the coded phrases they had developed during childhood to communicate privately in public settings. "The library books you requested have arrived earlier than expected," Sophie said quietly, indicating that unexpected visitors had arrived and were waiting in the private areas of the castle. Isabella excused herself from the ballroom, claiming she needed a moment to refresh her appearance before the formal ceremony. She made her way through the castle's service corridors to the private study, where she found 3 individuals waiting for her. Director James Whitfield from the Kingdom's Intelligence Service, Attorney General Patricia Harrington, and Professor Michael Thornton, a constitutional law expert from the university. Your Royal Highness, Director Whitfield began without preamble, we need to discuss a matter of utmost urgency that affects the security of the realm and your position as heir to the throne. Isabella's heart sank as she realized that the secret she had discovered might not be as carefully guarded as she had hoped. How much do you know? She asked, deciding that directness was her best strategy. We know about your adoption, Attorney General Harrington replied. We've known for several years, actually, as part of our responsibility to protect the royal family from potential threats. What concerns us is that this information has recently come to the attention of certain political groups who intend to use it against the monarchy. Professor Thornton spread several documents across the study's conference table, including legal briefs, constitutional precedents, and intelligence reports. The Republican Alliance has been investigating the backgrounds of royal families across Europe, looking for any irregularities they can use to challenge the legitimacy of monarchical institutions, he explained. They've discovered enough about your origins to piece together the basic facts, and they plan to release this information during tonight's engagement ceremony. Isabella felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The nightmare scenario that Queen Margaret had warned about in her letter was about to become reality, and it was happening at the worst possible moment, when the eyes of the international media were focused on the palace, and the kingdom's political future hung in the balance. What are my options? Isabella asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded despite the chaos in her mind. Director Whitfield leaned forward, his expression grim. The Republican Alliance has evidence, but it's incomplete. They know you were adopted, but they don't have proof of your biological parentage or the specific circumstances of the arrangement. If we act quickly, we can control the narrative and minimize the damage. Attorney General Harrington outlined 3 possible approaches. The first was to deny everything and challenge the Republican Alliance to produce irrefutable proof, a strategy that might buy time but would ultimately fail if more evidence emerged. The second was to acknowledge the adoption while emphasizing that it had been legal and conducted with the full knowledge and consent of Parliament, a partial truth that might preserve Isabella's claim to the throne while admitting the deception. The third option was the most radical. Isabella could voluntarily renounce her claim to the throne and reveal the full truth about her origins, potentially saving the monarchy by demonstrating that the royal family was willing to prioritize honesty over power. There's also a fourth option, Professor Thornton added quietly. We could present this revelation as a strength rather than a weakness. Your adoption demonstrates the royal family's commitment to providing opportunities for all citizens, regardless of birth circumstances. It could be framed as a progressive, forward-thinking approach to succession that reflects modern values about family and merit. Isabella listened to their arguments while her mind raced through the implications of each choice. Any decision she made would affect not only her own future, but the lives of King Charles, her biological mother Catherine, and the thousands of people whose livelihoods depended on the stability of the monarchy. I need to consult with King Charles before making any decision, Isabella said finally. This secret has shaped his life as much as mine, and he deserves to be part of whatever choice we make. The conversation with her adoptive father took place in his private chambers, away from the celebration that continued in the ballroom below. King Charles listened to Isabella's account of her meeting with Catherine and the intelligence service's warnings about the Republican alliance with the calm demeanor that had sustained him through decades of royal crises. I've been dreading this day for 25 years, he admitted when Isabella finished her report. Your mother and I knew that the truth would eventually surface, but we hoped it would happen under circumstances we could control, rather than as an attack from our political enemies. King Charles revealed that he had been monitoring the Republican Alliance's activities for months, working with intelligence services across Europe to track their investigations into royal families. Several other monarchies were facing similar challenges, and there was evidence of coordination between Republican movements in different countries. They're not just trying to destroy individual royal families, King Charles explained. They're attempting to undermine the entire concept of hereditary monarchy by demonstrating that royal bloodlines are myths used to justify unearned privilege and power. Isabella understood that the attack on her legitimacy was part of a broader assault on monarchical institutions across Europe. Her response would set a precedent that could influence how other royal families handled similar challenges in the future. As they discussed their options, Isabella found herself thinking about Catherine's 3 children, her half-siblings who were living normal lives, unaware that their sister was about to become the center of an international political crisis. She thought about David Clearwater, the father who had never known of her existence, and about Prince Marcus, who deserved to know the truth about the woman he was planning to marry.
I want to tell the truth, Isabella said finally.
Not because I'm forced to, but because it's the right thing to do. The monarchy should be based on service and merit, not on maintaining lies about bloodlines and genetic destiny. King Charles smiled, and Isabella saw pride and relief in his eyes. I was hoping you would say that, he said. Your mother and I raised you to value honesty and integrity above all else. I would rather see the monarchy end with honor than continue built on deception. They developed a plan that would allow Isabella to control the revelation rather than responding to accusations from the Republican alliance. She would announce the truth during her engagement ceremony, explaining the circumstances of her adoption and emphasizing the love and care that had shaped her upbringing. The announcement would be accompanied by the release of all relevant documents, including Catherine's consent to the adoption and legal opinions confirming that Isabella's claim to the throne remained valid under constitutional law. Most importantly, Isabella would use the revelation as an opportunity to propose reforms that would modernize the monarchy and make it more relevant to contemporary society. When Isabella returned to the ballroom, she found Prince Marcus and requested a private conversation before the formal ceremony began. In a quiet alcove overlooking the palace gardens, she told him everything: her adoption, her biological parents, the political crisis, and her decision to reveal the truth publicly. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression growing more thoughtful as Isabella's story unfolded. When she finished, he was quiet for several minutes, processing the implications of what he had learned. Does this change how you feel about our engagement? Isabella asked, her heart pounding as she waited for his response. It changes everything, Marcus replied, and Isabella's heart sank until she saw the smile spreading across his face. It makes me love you even more, if that's possible. You're choosing truth over power, integrity over convenience. These are the qualities I want in a wife and the mother of my children. The formal engagement ceremony began an hour later than scheduled, allowing time for Isabella's announcement to be properly prepared and for key government officials to be briefed on the situation. When Isabella stepped forward to address the assembled guests, the ballroom fell silent in anticipation of the traditional engagement speech. Instead, Isabella delivered a 10-minute address that forever changed the nature of the Ravencroft monarchy. She spoke about love, family, truth, and service, explaining how her adoption had shaped her understanding of what it meant to be royal. She acknowledged the political challenges facing monarchical institutions and proposed a series of reforms designed to make the royal family more accountable to the people they served. The reaction was immediate and intense. Some guests applauded enthusiastically, moved by Isabella's courage and honesty. Others sat in stunned silence, unsure how to respond to such an unprecedented revelation. The media representatives present began frantically updating their editors, understanding that they were witnessing a historic moment that would reshape European politics. In the days that followed, the revelation of Isabella's adoption dominated international headlines and sparked intense debate about the role of monarchy in modern society. The Republican alliance found their planned attack neutralized by Isabella's preemptive honesty, and public opinion polls showed surprising support for her decision to prioritize truth over political expedience. Catherine Ashworth handled the sudden media attention with grace and dignity, giving interviews that emphasized her gratitude for the opportunities Isabella's adoption had provided and her pride in the woman her daughter had become. David Clearwater was contacted by journalists in France but declined to comment, requesting privacy while he processed the news that he had never known existed. The constitutional crisis that many had predicted failed to materialize. Parliament voted overwhelmingly to confirm Isabella's right to inherit the throne, and legal scholars agreed that adoption did not disqualify her from royal succession. More importantly, the revelation sparked a broader conversation about modernizing monarchical institutions and making them more responsive to contemporary values. Isabella's engagement to Prince Marcus proceeded as planned, with their wedding scheduled for the following year. The couple announced their intention to establish new traditions that would emphasize service, transparency, and accessibility in their approach to royal duties. As Isabella stood in the palace gardens a month after her birthday celebration, watching the sun set over the kingdom she would one day rule, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The truth about her origins had not destroyed the monarchy or ended her royal future. Instead, it had provided an opportunity to build something stronger and more authentic. The little girl who had been given up by one loving mother and raised by another had become a woman capable of transforming an ancient institution while honoring the best of its traditions. Isabella's story was no longer about maintaining perfect bloodlines or protecting family secrets. It was about creating a monarchy that reflected the values of honesty, service, and genuine connection to the people it existed to serve. In embracing the truth about her past, Princess Isabella had secured not only her own future, but the future of the crown itself, proving that sometimes the most radical act is simply being honest about who you really are.